Brian Rosario with Long Beach State University. I would like to also preface, if you have any questions, throw it out into the chat. This conversation is coming from a lot of the conversations or the questions that I got after I presented, but we'll just get going. So I'm going to kind of go through the first few slides pretty quick just to catch everyone up if they weren't able to catch the final four conversation. But my whole objective with this webinar is to really convince us as college coaches that we have the skills to be really good fundraisers. So what are those skills? Obviously, with recruiting, we understand that we have to identify talent. We're all out there this summer at events all throughout the high school season. We're evaluating talent. That's the biggest thing. Next, we're building the relationships. I shared that, after the relationships, many times the offers go out. And then after the offer, one of the biggest things that we do as college coaches is then develop that talent. So my focus, during that conversation was really showing that the evaluation of skill, the building of relationships, offering players a scholarship, and then doing the player development while they are with us is really what we do best in terms of recruiting. This is all the front end of recruiting. Next, what are the common, like if I said, hey, let's fundraise, most of us start thinking about fundraisers. So not so much fundraising, but fundraisers. And, for the simple fact of just kind of like throwing things out there, obviously shoot-a-thons, business sponsorships, golf outings. Many of us have that, whether it's a department-wide or program, silent or live auctions, game day raffles. So anything to kind of get fans into the stands, donating to a cause. So, think of our Think Pink, the coaches and cancer events, and then sell-a-thons. So like fundraisers is kind of like just one-offs, the events. Those are the things that I'm trying to shift with kind of the conversation. At the Final Four, then we shared like what major fundraising skills are and why it matters. So many of us are in summer now. So what are we having? We're having the budget talks. So fundraising matters because one, it offsets the program's gaps, whether it's the wants that we want to provide as an experience to our players, the needs. So that's the travel, the hotels, the buses, all that. It could help shortcomings, the one-off. So think of COVID. Many of us either lost a scholarship, lost some of the budgeting lines. Hopefully no one lost, personnel, but that is also why fundraising matters. And then ultimately, I think it shows the strength of the department and the program when you start talking about the bigger picture. So not only just the institution and school, but then within student affairs, within the department, and then obviously with your individual program. So fundraising matters. Having fundraising events, those matter. But where I'd like to kind of take it now is how do we become better at fundraising? Now, the fundraising cycle is pretty simple. One, you got to identify donors, identify who to target, why you're targeting them. Then there's a cultivation in terms of getting to know them, building up. Are they interested in programming? Are they interested in, support of the program in terms of programming or the actual program, the institution, the school, the solicitation. So that's the ask. And then obviously stewardship. So that comes after the solicitation and perhaps a gift where you're actually building those relationships and understanding how do we get the reoccurring gift. So once we identify the cycle, then obviously now it's where are the common threads between what we do as basketball coaches and what major fundraisers do on an everyday basis. So this screen will show you that there's a lot of likeliness. So the evaluation of skill is similar to the identification. The building of relationships, that's the cultivation stage. The offers are scholarship offers that go out. That's the solicitation in terms of the fundraising. And then what we talked about as well is the player development. That's the back end, is the stewardship. So as you can see, there's a lot of similarities between us as recruiters, what we do at this level, and then fundraising, major gift fundraising. So next slide talks about what we've showed is kind of the quick hitter. So the types of gifts. So there's the annual, there's the major, there's the ultimate. So that's the endowments. A lot of the Ivy League head coaches positions are endowed. There's the move management. So what are you doing in order to move a donor through the process? So from cultivation stage to the solicitation stage to the stewardship stage. How do you get an annual gift to become a major gift? How do you get a major gift to then become an ultimate gift or the endowment gift? Then there's the donor groups. There's the alumni, the parents of the alumni, the friends of the program. Part of this is now shifting our mindset of who touches us the most. Our players, right? Our alumni, their parents, friends of the program. That could be community leaders. That could be community members. And then obviously the methods of touches. That's through newsletters, through direct mail, telethons, special events, maybe holding an event where you're asking alumni or donors to come in. And then you have the mass marketing and the personal solicitation. So those are the key components of fundraising, and not just creating events. So you're not an event runner, but you're now soliciting like unique event or unique asks for dollars. And then we talked about how would you organize this as a staff? So much like recruiting, right? Our head coach, top 10 donors, top 10 alumni. They're making the calls, the hosting of the visits, the one-off asks. Ultimately, they're the manager of that major gift or the ultimate or endowment gift. And then as assistant coaches, think of how we organize recruiting. You know, we're managing a little bit more or deeper lists. The calls are happening, the texts are happening. What happens at events? We're usually cultivating or stewarding relationships of whether it's alumni parents, or community members. And then ultimately, you know, as assistants, we then manage all the movements and then ultimately set up our head coach for those asks. So both fundraising and recruiting, it's very similar. And then we talked about kind of the move management. So move management is a fundraising term. You have indirect touches, so the electronic touches. So that could be newsletter updates. It could be invites to games or events. You have the non-asking touch. So think of when they come to open practices or games, you're not really soliciting any asks there. It could be recognition nights. So think of, you know, senior night or alumni night that we hold. You know, you're trying to move them through this management cycle to ultimately get an asking touch. So that could be done on the phone. It could be done at a golf outing. Think of, you know, when you have your foursome and you have 3 donors there, you're kind of leading them into an ask. It could be silent auctions or live auctions. Banquets are a great place for asks. So the move management cycle is really getting them to hear about you, to feel you, to get to know you, but ultimately it moves that donor towards an ask. And then we talked about, you know, how, you know, what do you want to target with these moves? Obviously, back-to-back gifts are major. Like those are the things that we're trying to do. You're trying to up the ante. So if a donor is giving at a $25 level, a $50 level, a $500 level, over time, you want to up that. So can we get a $500 donor over the last 3 years up to now 1,000? And then obviously you want to ask for that major gift every year and a half to maybe 2 years. I mean, there's a cycle to that. And then ultimately you lead them towards the ultimate gift. And that's a life-changing, sustainable gift that, think again of those head coaching positions that are endowed. And then what my whole point is the one thing that we have to do, and this is the challenge to, I think, all of us as coaches, is, you know, how we treat, how we serve our current players. That then creates the opportunities. So how do we think of our players into the opportunity, because players obviously move, they graduate, they become alumni. Alumni then are either in our community, or if they move out of our community, it's still opportunity, because those are the ones we touch. So the one thing that we all have to do is start thinking about, how do we serve our current players so that it can become an opportunity? Now, with today, I want to take it a step further. So now that there's a general understanding and kind of these parallel tracks between who we are as coaches, i.e. the recruiters that we are, how do we really move ourselves to become really good fundraisers? Now, part of these next few slides is the meat of today's programming, but it's where I want to kind of take the conversation so that we all understand that if we can move our thinking from events, fundraising events, which is important, into major fundraisers, that mentality, that is kind of where we want to go. So now that we have that understanding between those two spheres and tracks, what do we do now? How do we organize our data? How do we qualify our donors, our alumni? And then ultimately, how do we, really begin to outreach? So just like recruiting, we're only as good as our data. And so, the way we try to organize our data is into what's management. So again, think of recruiting with all these slides, but really try to move towards, thinking like a fundraiser. So obviously, you have your top 10, and these 10 people, 10 donors, 10 alumni, or it could be community member, they are qualified. Now, qualified just means we understand what our ask is going to be. We are moving them towards that ask. These are the 10 highly percentaged folks that we can get a gift out of. So if we haven't heard from someone, or if someone hasn't heard from us, they would not be in our top 10. So these top 10 are the donors or the alumni, the community members that we understand what we can ask for, that we are probably going to get that gift, and then what does it have to look like in the sense of the presentation. So after the top 10, then we have our focus 50. Now, these are donors that, we understand that they do want to give. We are trying to qualify them even more to understand, what is that dollar amount? What is that packaging? What does that look like? And then it may take us a while. So this is anywhere from a year to a year and a half through the cycle. So eventually your next 50, we can slide them into the top 10. And then your next 100. Now, if we're a young program, we may not have 100 alumni. If we're a historic institution that has this, 40, 50, 60 years of history, then, you got to manage all of those alums along with the community members. So the next 100, they're warm to the program. So think of players. I mean, players are the one line to who you are as coaches, whether directly they played for you, or indirectly you inherited a program and now you inherited all these alumni. One of the things that I know we're doing here, Amy Wright, our head coach, from day one, has been reaching out to the alumni, really because of all the history that we have. We've been to the Final Four twice. Our 80s and early 90s team, they were so much success. I mean, that is the one thing that Amy has been focused on, is the outreach to the alumni that she inherited, that we inherited. So these are players who are warm. They may not be qualified yet, but they're the ones who want to learn more about what you're doing. They want to learn more about the players, the current players. They may want to learn about what direction are we heading as a program. So these are the next best pool of donors. And then your final 100 are really just the cold leads. So these could be the community leaders that may have given 20 years ago, that have kind of fallen off the plate. It could be, now that we're, managing the transfer portal. I mean, these could be the one-off transfers that we only coached for a year, that were in the program for a year, that may not identify with like Long Beach being their alma mater. So these are the pool. This is the pool that you want to eventually get them warm to the program. So like recruiting, this is a pretty big list, but unlike recruiting, this is a greater list in the sense of having to manage, because alumni are important, their parents are important, and obviously the community members that want to be involved are important. But this is how you would organize it in a way that is manageable. So the top 10, obviously that is maybe what your head coach is managing. The Focus 50 Next 100 is shared amongst the staff. And then your final 100 are the ones that you want to try to maybe get to the game and have those conversations. But eventually you move in reverse. So the final 100 becomes the next 100, becomes the Focus 50, and then eventually the top 10. Then we have, how do you qualify? What's important to understand, because we just don't want to just throw out asks like, here's what we want, like just give whatever. At some point, the top 10 really need to be understood as to what is that dollar amount. For example, when I was a major gift fundraiser in Indiana, I told a story at the Final Four. I totally got a qualifying wrong, where I thought the capacity of the family was greater. I made an ask for greater, but the look on their faces when that ask went out, I knew from the start, got it wrong. So that's an example of, they may not have been in my top 10, or should have been in my top 10. That should have been in my kind of Focus 50 group. But here are just general points that you want to kind of think about as you move your donors from the next 100 to the Focus 50 to eventually the top 10. So the first is obviously capacity. What is their dollar amounts that they can give? What's the disposable income? Where do they live? What has been their work and experience, professional experience? Like, what does that capacity look like? What is the time and talents to the program? Like, is the capacity $1 or is it time? Is it volunteerism? Next, it's their passions. And this is, what are they interested in? There are some alumni and donors who want to give and offset operational costs. There are donors or alumni who are interested in maybe some of the programs that you hold. So like a summer book club, a speaker series, they want to be invested in and involved in these areas. And obviously, trying to understand their passions have to align then with their capacity. And then the next would be giving history. If you have a donor or an alum or an alum's parent who has given every year for the last 5 years, then that is something that's important, because are you upping the ante? Are you asking for more? Are you now redirecting from an annual gift to more of a sustainable gift that is a one-off or a major gift? Where did the gift go? So that could be, did it go into operational? Did it go into maybe a foreign trip? Did it go into programming? So understanding the history of gifts obviously goes into it. And then the experiences of the program. So more specifically, what was their experience while in the program or, involved in the program? So think of an alum, did they even like it? Did they have a good experience? Were they, a high level teammate in the locker room? All of that kind of goes into these experiences. If you're cultivating or stewarding parents, like what was their daughter's or son's involvement with the program, and did they like it? Did they transfer out? Did they transfer in? And then this becomes their school that they're identifying with. And then, if you're talking about the community members or, donors from the community, it's like, what is the knowledge of the program? Have they been involved in recent years? Are they looking to get involved? So all of these go into kind of the qualifying of your alumni and donors. Major gift fundraisers have tools to kind of qualify all the history of giving from a donor. We may not have that ability, but slowly understanding where money goes, why money came in, and then what their capacity is kind of what you want to do with being able to qualify a donor. And then it goes to then the outreach. this is the cycle that you will always be in, much like recruiting, but in the sense of in-house. So you're constantly reaching out to your donors or your community members or your general pool of folks that maybe are on a general newsletter. Like outreach always happens. Outreach can be the indirect, like we discussed. So that think of newsletters, emails that go out, game times and dates. But when you start getting, true leads, it is then the follow-up to those folks. So someone may come in and say, hey, I haven't been involved in the program, love to come by practice. If you miss that opportunity, you miss out on an opportunity for a gift. So the follow-up then has to now start the qualifying kind of checklist. So, you follow up, you ask them to come to practice, and now the conversations are different. What was your experience? How involved have you been? So that follow-up then kind of goes into the qualifying, and the qualifying then it goes back to outreach, because once you start qualifying and once you start following up, though that process should then lead you to the next question in terms of what that outreach. So think of that example of someone coming to campus who hasn't been involved in recent years, but now they want to be involved. What's the next event that they can come to, whether that is a alumni recognition event, whether it's a get to know with your team, whether it's community service, any of those can work to get them back so that then the cycle continues, the follow-up, the qualifying, and then eventually the next outreach. So once all that happens, then it's like, how do you package these opportunities? The easy get is the annual. So think of the emails that go out that could be under the department, but it could be within your program, just the general asks, hey, give back to the program. It could be a dollar, think of political campaigns, up to whatever gift you want. So kind of an open-ended, ask. It could be recurring or sustainable. So think of, the gifts or the ask that, you want to make sure happens, monthly or annually. Like those are the real gets that you can get, because that then goes into the qualifying. An operational slate. So you might be sitting, in spring and summer and looking over your budget, and you see some holes or gaps in the budget that you want to offset with, a gift. So, the bus, the flights, the hotels, you're not giving those up. Those aren't the gaps. Gaps could be, the extra pair of gear, shoes or whatnot. It could be, books in the summer. It could be, anything that you want to provide or give to your team that you do not have a line item for. That's the slate. So you can kind of give it to donors saying, hey, what would you like to sponsor and or give? Obviously, programming and foreign trips, these are bigger, these are planned out. You could do a slate. So like, hey, would you like to sponsor X amount of meals when we're gone? Would you like to sponsor the flights? It could be that. It could be programming. So think of the book clubs, think of the speaker series, naming rights. I don't know if the NCAA will allow us to do this, but you see it now with the pros and FIBA. Sponsorship can go on jerseys now. It could be offices, it could be locker rooms, it could be anything that someone could sponsor and then put their name to, which donors like to see their name. And then obviously pledges. So these pledges are kind of, think of over time. So if you see a consistent gap in your operational line, if you want to make sure something happens at least over the next 2, 3, 4, maybe a contract, then the pledges are important, because you can go to a donor and say, hey, we need $25,000 paid over 5 years. So it's $5,000 a year. So any of those pledges work. So that's how you can kind of package it once you get these multiple asks out and managing not just the top 10, but a focus 50, making sure that donors understand that they have options to give, but also areas to give as well. And And then that's kind of all I had for today, in the sense of, really understanding not only taking yourself or your program to become a fundraiser, but I think, and I'm talking major fundraiser, I think it's a challenge for us to kind of think out of the box, but also understand, what we're in. We're in a new era with NIL, with the transfers. So I think for us as coaches to not just think of ourselves as the stewards of the program with who's in our program currently, but now stewards of the program long-term and long-term sustainability. It's going to take us not to think like fundraising events, but to think of us as fundraisers. So that's all I had. I wanted to leave time for questions if there are any. But I definitely want to, again, thank the WBCA and the NABC for this opportunity, to kind of just share the experiences that I had as a major fundraiser. And it was, it was an aha moment when, I get thrown into that profession and that industry. But also it was something that I just fell in love with, because it was just those indirect skills of being a recruiter as well. So with that, I'll open it up. If there's any questions, I can answer. All right, so we got a couple. Where do we find the video information you spoke about in the first discussion? They didn't film it, but if we can get back to that last slide, if you want to shoot me an email or a call, we can definitely connect over phone or Zoom, and we can, talk about what we did. But that is one reason why I wanted to kind of go over the first few slides. How do you track reaching out to donors? So this is much like recruiting. We may not track every text, every call, every, the only thing we track is when we move from one stage of the moves management to the next. So think of an outreach, an email, and then an email or call comes in saying, hey, I saw an email. I see you're having open practices. I played from 91 to 95. I'd like to come by. That correspondence may not be tracked per se, but once that person gets to the practice, then we start tracking. Okay, we got her to practice. We're, through the conversations at practice, now this donor, this alum is interested in perhaps getting to know the team. So let's move them towards an event where we can get them in front of the team. It could be a cookout. It could be, the end of the summer get together, anything. So that's what we track more than the individual correspondence. What did you mention about sponsors on jerseys? Oh, so like the pros and FIBA, they now have, sponsorships on jerseys. I don't know if the NCAA will let us do that per se, but that would be a naming right. So, a sponsor, whether it's an alum who has a business, it could be a local business, may want their, patch on your jersey for the next 3 years. So that is something that, again, I don't know if we're going to get there with jerseys, but it could be warm-up shirts. It could be gear that they wear, and so, we got to start thinking about, how do we offset some of those costs by now getting a donor's name on. Where do you get your lists for key community members that might be targeted donors? So that is kind of, anytime you inherit a program, I think one of the very first asks would be go to your development office and ask who's donated to our program in the last 5 years. You'll start seeing names. Some are similar in the sense of they played, they're alumni, but you will start seeing community members. The other thing is, I do think us as coaches, we got to challenge ourselves to get back into the community. So it's not just having camps where the community can come in. It's not just having special events at games where community comes in. We got to get out. And that could be going to a Chamber of Commerce meeting. That could be going to a local Rotary Club meeting. Most of the institutions are part of those organizations in the first place. And most of the time, as a member, you can send anyone you want under that umbrella. So I would challenge us coaches to get back into the community and be part of some of those programs. So like, you know, when I was coaching at Chandler Gilbert, I got into a program, it was called Chandler Leadership, where I got, you know, kind of into the business community of Chandler and made some connections there. And obviously through conversations, there was a lot of people, but also businesses interested in women and women's athletics. And so we were able to kind of generate some gifts through that program. It's a long-winded answer, but that's how you kind of generate your community member lists. Let's see how, okay, so this webinar will be posted. It'll be posted up on both the WBCA and the NABC website. So you can definitely get all the points from this. But again, hit me up if you want. It's easy to jump on a call or a Zoom. Next question, how do you coordinate with other athletic programs and the institution's general fundraising to avoid making multiple asks for the same donor? Okay, so this is more of a mindset. There are going to be certain donors that the school, the institution, and or the department already gobbled up. So the easiest example would be anyone who went pro. I guarantee the department already has that name and they may kind of take stake on that. I would challenge you as a coach to really get involved with the development office, understand from an admin perspective of what's important, because, you know, those donors or those alumni were part of your program first. And so if you want to move the needle within your program, you got to generate the conversations and the opportunities with your alumni and their parents first. They belong to you. So eventually, if there is an opportunity where you're going to make a lifetime ask, think of the endowment ask, that's going to come from a lot of the times the head coach along with the development officer and AD. But eventually you work that to that opportunity. But if it's really just kind of coordinating in terms of outreach and all that, I mean, we're not really looking outside of our lane, because, a women's basketball athlete is a women's basketball athlete. I believe most alumni want to be involved in the program. It's whether or not they've been touched in the sense of, have they been asked to come to practice? Have they been asked to get involved? I have, heard from alumni where it's like, I am not going to, give back to my alma mater until, so-and-so's gone. You're going to get some of those. But I would look in your lane and look to stay in your lane with all of your athletes to generate the fundraising for your program. And I believe most of the asks in general, athletically, are general annual appeals. No one's really working on creating a major fundraising program within each individual program. They might be like kind of having the historical. So I think men's volleyball, women's volleyball, those are good examples. Obviously, we have some coaches that have been at their institutions for 25, 30 years. I mean, they have generated the clout to become a major fundraising program. Most of everyone else is not thinking that way. And that's the challenge of this conversation, is how do we get our staff and our mindset thinking major fundraising as opposed to these annual gifts. That's the only way we're going to move our needle in terms of the line items and budget. And most times, I mean, just to kind of round out this question, most of the time, the development office will allow you to keep your donors. They're not going to snatch it up unless they see something that isn't happening or what they're hearing from the actual donor. So some donors are, they might use athletics as a way in, but they want to put up a library. That's out of your control. But I would say most will still have portions back to the program because that's what got them their start. Any other questions? And if not, again, my email is up on screen. That's my cell number. Shoot me a text, shoot me an email if you want to, think about this and let it sit, maybe talk to your staffs. I'm always willing to, share my experiences that I had as a major fundraiser with anyone to help them organize their fundraising efforts and or their program. So again, I just want to thank both coaching associations for this opportunity, and I look forward to continuing these conversations.